What's up, everybody? Welcome back. I'm Wyatt Bagnall. Taylor's not able to be with me today, so I am going to go through our picks for week 2. I've got his with me as well, so I'll keep you appraised of those. Starting off with Thursday Night Football, we got the Chargers and the Chiefs going at it. This is a really, really important game. The Chiefs have been sort of the king of this division for a few years now. But many people suspect the Chargers have the best team this year. Me and Taylor are actually in agreement on this game. We both think the Chargers take this one. It's really, really... how best to describe this? Part of its hope, I think, is we like the Chargers. We like Justin Herbert. And I think it'd be really, really nice for the NFL and for the AFC West in general if we get a little bit of turn up in some of these divisions, and I think this is a perfect example of it. But to approach it a little bit more analytically, the Chargers and Chiefs both won in week 1. Many people might come away from those two games thinking the Chiefs looked more impressive. I personally felt the Chargers were more impressive due to the strength of their opponent. This game is loaded with implications. And if the Chargers win, they start off 2-0 in the AFC West and give themselves a nice buffer over those other teams. If the Chiefs win, they basically make a statement of not yet. But in terms of the rosters of these teams, and this is something I'm going to be doing for all of them, I'm going to break down like head-to-head who I think is better at which positions. I think if you're going to go by coaching, the Chiefs are better. I would call quarterback a wash. You could say Mahomes or Herbert, yada, yada, yada. You could argue that. Truthfully, they're even. They're both in that A-plus tier. So there's not a huge advantage there. Running back, I'd give it to the Chargers. Wide receiver, I'd give it to the Chargers. Tight end, I'm obviously going to give to Kansas City. And then the O-line, I'm going with the Chargers as well. Offensively, they're just more talented. But Andy Reid's system with Patrick Mahomes and Travis Kelce is deadly. In terms of the defense, D-line is Chargers by a mile with Khalil Mack and Joey Bosa. Those two edge rushers by themselves. Chris Jones is a great player, but I would rather have the Chargers front. Linebacker, the Chargers haven't had good linebackers in a long time, so it's almost Chiefs by default on that. Corners, the Chargers all the way. They got some good corners and safeties as well, with Derwin James in particular. And the special teams, I'd go with Kansas City. The Chargers, they have a weird way of messing it up on special teams, and the Chiefs don't. So I think the Chiefs special teams unit is just much more reliable. So my official prediction for this game is that the Chargers will edge out the Chiefs in a relatively high-scoring affair. I think what this will ultimately come down to is the Chargers' pass rush and opportunistic secondary will force just enough mistakes from Kansas City to get the win. I think Kansas City, they could certainly pull this off, but they would have to play a style of football I don't think they like to play, which is that much more patient style. Mahomes showed last week he has no issue spreading the ball around, stuff like that. That's all well and good. But I think it's very different against a team like the Chargers than it is against the Cardinals. And Joey Bosa and Khalil Mack will hunt, and then Derwin James, Asante Samuel, J.C. Jackson if he plays. Those guys will be lurking in the back end for any forced balls or errant throws or pressures, anything like that. So I got the Chargers taking week 1. Taylor has the same thing. His reasons are Herbert's better than Mahomes. Chargers defense can provide answers to the Chiefs offense. And Keenan Allen's injury is worth noting, but Mike Williams is there to step up. He says Herbert will lift the team and all hands on deck to beat Kansas City. I think that's generally accurate. The Keenan Allen injury is important, but Justin Herbert has a similar player in Mike Williams, so that's true. But yeah, we are 1 for 1 on that. We both agree that Chargers come up and beat KC here in week 2. Moving on to the Sunday slate, we got the New England Patriots going to Pittsburgh. Now, New England and Pittsburgh, this is the first time they're meeting up in the post-Brady Roethlisberger era. Both teams have pretty similar showings in week 1, if you really look at it, but with drastically different results. The Steelers' defense dominated the Bengals' offense to the tune of 5 turnovers and 6 sacks. One of those turnovers was a pick 6, and that was hugely, hugely important. But for as impressive as the Steelers' defense was, their offense was just as unimpressive. They really did nothing. They failed to optimize on five turnovers, and it was on them that Cincinnati was allowed back into that game. Granted, they ultimately won it, but that's not what you want to see when you're getting 5 turnovers. And for New England, the template of good defense and anemic offense was in full use down in Miami. The Patriots, in terms of result, though, they lost. They took a very infamously peculiar approach to their offensive coordinator position, and through 1 week, it looks every bit as bad as people thought it could. It looked really, really incompetent, and the Patriots defense they did their job and held a potentially explosive offense in Miami in check, with the exception of that long Jalen Waddle play, in which he just broke some tackles too. So it's not like it was a coverage bust. And the Dolphins got a defensive touchdown as well. So the Pats and Steelers, they're in the same spot here. Good defense, not good offense. In terms of like the roster competition I've been doing here, for head coach, I'll call it a wash. Both Belichick and Tomlin are A+. Belichick, you would give it to him like in terms of all-time legacy, but one of the few coaches he doesn't absolutely outclass is Mike Tomlin. Quarterback, I'll take Mac Jones over Mitch Trubisky or Kenny Pickett because I don't know what Kenny Pickett is. Running back, I'll give that to the Steelers. Wide receiver, give that to the Steelers. Tight end, I also give that to the Steelers. So in terms of offensive weapons, it's Pittsburgh all day. The Patriots didn't bring in any weapons in a baffling move, really. O-line, I'll give that to the Pats. The Steelers' O-line's been pretty notoriously bad the last several years. And it's a huge reason why Najee Harris, most of his production comes really from like swing passes and stuff like that. In terms of rushing yards, he often finds himself running into just a wall. So that's not ideal. D-line, Steelers all the way. They got a great one. Linebacking core, I'll give it to the Steelers still, but TJ Watt's injury is certainly significant. We'll see exactly how significant against an offense like the Patriots, but you'd much rather have him than not, obviously. Corner, I would give it to the Pats. The Pats are still they're more solid there. And the Steelers, they don't really have anyone of note at corner that's particularly worrisome. In terms of who will look better, it might be the Steelers corners because they're playing against the Pats receivers, and there's nothing really to speak of with the Pats receivers. Then safety, I'll give that to the Steelers. Minkah by himself gets that. The Pats have good depth and solid players, but Minkah is a standout. And then special teams, they both have solid special teams, but given the way last week went with the missed kicks and everything like that, I'll give the Pats the edge for this game. I think ultimately, though, the Pittsburgh Steelers will win this in a defensive battle, and the Steelers will just get one more play on offense than the Pats do. Maybe it's a Deontay Johnson, big one-handed catch. Maybe we see George Pickens make a play or Chase Claypool. Najee Harris could do it, Freiermuth. Like they just have the weapons to make it happen one more time than the Pats do. Taylor also agrees with me on this one. He thinks it's the Steelers. Steelers defense without Watt is still terrifying, he says. Trubisky versus Jones is a battle of weak offenses. Bet the under. Yeah, for all you guys out there sports betting, hammer the under. And then Deontay Johnson's worth watching out for. Keep an eye out for Warren to take over for Najee's injury. I heard Najee's playing, but I suppose if you're a big fantasy football guy like Taylor is, be looking at the Steelers' backup backs. I heard Najee's playing, though, so I would take that with a grain of salt. And then from Pittsburgh, we go to... From Pittsburgh, we go to New York City. Carolina and the Giants. Two teams that held their own much better than anyone thought they would in week one. They're extremely interesting as feisty teams. Neither of these two are like true contenders or really even that good, but these are the type of teams that can throw a wrench into like your plans in any given week. I mean, Carolina battled the Browns to the bitter end, but the field goal sealed it for Cleveland. And then the Giants, I mean, they pulled off an upset, and it almost ended the same way for them, except the Titans missed the game-winning field goal. They both showed a resilient attitude against a superior opponent, and now they get to play a team that's more on their level. So maybe we'll actually see, I think we'll get a better gauge of these teams in terms of where they truly lie. It's tough. It's tough because I still think the Giants in particular really overperformed But that's what I'm more looking out for. I'm looking at the Giants a lot more in this game than the Panthers from a curiosity standpoint. Because when I look at like down the roster, it's like head coach, I'd call it a wash. We don't know enough about Dable, and Matt Rule hasn't proven to be a coach that I would give any advantage to. Quarterback, I'd rather have Baker than Daniel Jones. Running back, I'd say they would both get points at running back for Barkley and McCaffrey. Panthers got better receivers and tight ends. O-line, I'd say the Giants are a bit better, not much. Neither of these lines are particularly great. They both are featuring rookies and young guys, but at least Andrew Thomas for the Giants is like a solid left tackle, so I'll give them the slight edge there. D-line goes to Carolina. Linebackers go to Carolina. Corners go to Carolina, and safety goes to Carolina. So, I mean, they're basically better all around. Special teams, sort of same deal. Neither of these teams are particularly awful on special teams, but neither is special. But ultimately, I think the Panthers will be able to slow down someone like Saquon Barkley, who really went off in Tennessee. I think they'll put all their energy into that, and I think that effectively stops the Giants. The Panthers, they'll be a bit sloppy, probably like week one. Baker Mayfield will throw one or two passes that you might be able to pick off. Except this time, I think they're gonna come away with a win in New York. They're just, the talent gap isn't huge between these teams, but the Panthers are just more solid in more places. The Giants fully embraced the idea of a rebuild this offseason, and it shows in their roster. I think Carolina goes ahead and bounces back and gets a win in week 2. He agrees with me again. He's also got the Panthers. He's got a chip. He says Baker has a chip on his shoulder, and that'll make it interesting. He likes an angry Baker Mayfield. Dable's offense and Danny Dimes worth watching to see if it's coming together a bit more. That's fair. I'm really interested in the Giants receivers because I heard Kadarius Toney's hurt. Kenny Galladay's made a tissue paper also and hasn't worked out. No tight ends to speak of. Yeah, it's sort of tough to evaluate Daniel Jones, but maybe we'll see something against the Panthers rather than the Titans. And then he says C-Mac versus Saquon. You could boil it down to that, I suppose, particularly for the Giants. Saquon Barkley is sort of their entire offense. If I'm the Panthers, I'm being real careful trying to feature Christian McCaffrey because if you think that you have a chance to be feisty, particularly in a weaker NFC, I would be very, very hesitant to give him a really heavy workload. Ultimately, we both think Carolina is going to go into MetLife and get it done. Okay. Next up, we got the next New York team. It is the Jets going out of town to face the Browns. Cleveland opened up this year strong, but they're in a very tenuous and tough position in that their roster's great. They're doing amazing. But they got Jacoby Brissett as their starter, and they're sort of just having to tread water till somewhere around week 11, week 12, if the NFL reinstates Deshaun Watson at that point. And they managed to get the win in Carolina. Now, fortunately for them, that challenge was a much stiffer one than this one. The Jets were not a particularly great team to begin with, and then they lost Zach Wilson. Then they lost Mekhi Becton. Then they brought in Dwayne Brown. Then he got hurt. And Cleveland has every chance to start off 2-0 by virtue of just weak opponents. Which, hey, great for them, because I think that what they're going to do, they're going to be able to do whatever they want. And what they want to do is ground and pound the Jets into submission and not put too much onto the plate of Jacoby Brissett. And I think it works. I mean, it's easy to do when you got running backs like Nick Chubb and Kareem Hunt. And when the Jets don't have particularly anything to match up with that. But in terms of breaking down like these two teams, I'd rather have Stefanski than Saleh at this point. Saleh could prove to be something good, but he just hasn't had much luck in New York so far. And similarly, Stefanski, he hasn't had much luck in Cleveland, but he's helped really turn that team around and assemble a great roster and got them to the playoffs. So I'll take Stefanski. Quarterback, it's a wash. It's two backups. You wouldn't really want either one of them out there. Running back, wide receiver, and tight end. I mean, they are all pretty definitively in Cleveland's favor, and so is the O-line and the D-line. So Cleveland owns both the trenches. I'll give the Jets, I'll say that they can have linebacker because of just depth with C.J. Mosley and Quan Alexander, but JOK plays really well for Cleveland. I'll give the Jets that one, but it's kind of a mercy point. Corner and safety, both Browns, and I'll throw the Jets another bone and say special teams. They can have special teams, I guess. But prediction for the game overall, Browns will win this game on the back of Nick Chubb and Kareem Hunt and their defense, and I think they'll do it pretty easily. Sorry, Jets fans. I know you guys were pretty optimistic coming into this year. Bad injuries at a bad time at the worst positions, and all of a sudden, all that optimism is gone. So, sorry about that. And yeah, Taylor agrees. I mean, this one, I expect us to agree on this one. Yeah, Browns are just more complete. Lack identity without Zach Wilson. Another rough day. He says Mike White, maybe. I think they're going to play Joe Flacco just because he is a veteran with more experience. I think there's a reason. I think they would have loved to have had Mike White be the backup, but I get the feeling he showed something that made them nervous. Because otherwise, I mean, there's no reason that he wouldn't otherwise. So, yeah, we both got Browns on that one. Now we're getting a rematch of the biggest upset from last year. Was it the biggest upset? I mean, it felt like it. The Colts are going to Jacksonville for a rematch of the Clown Town disaster. This is a game that the Colts should win, but so was last week, and so was Week 18 in this same building, in this fortress that is Jacksonville. This is a game that the Colts had better win though, or Jim Irsay will want answers and heads could roll. I mean, they cut their kicker for missing the kick last week. I don't think Jim Irsay has anybody on a particularly long leash right now. The Jags are theoretically improved from last year though, but they're still in the midst of a full-blown rebuild. Trevor Lawrence could make a statement of his improvement against a team like Indy, a division rival, and Jags fans would love to see it. But I don't know, there just hasn't. It's just so tough to see that happening because the Jags really just don't have that much talent. The AFC South in general, they're in a tough spot after week 1. Everyone lost except for the Colts and the Texans who tied each other. It's up for the taking, but it looks like no one wants it. I would recommend the Colts in particular. Don't let this one slip away and don't let it go on too long, or I think Tennessee will find a way to snatch this from them. They might not have won in week 1. Should have, but they're just tougher, and I would be very nervous. But in terms of the rosters, though, I mean, my God. It's like, head coach, give me the Colts. Quarterback, I'll say Trevor Lawrence because Matt Ryan looked abysmal in a Colts uniform the first time we saw him. So I'll say Trevor Lawrence for now. Running back, Colts. Receivers, I'll actually take the Jags and for tight end because at least they have them. Like, the Colts' weapons aren't good. O-line and D-line, I'm taking the Colts all day. Linebacker, Colts. Corner, Colts. Safety, Colts. Special teams, Jags. I would normally put the Colts for special teams, but with them cutting their kicker, I have no idea who they actually have kicking the ball for them. I need to see that. A lot of times when teams are cutting kickers in the midst of the season, that's a pretty bad sign. So I'll give the Jags a special teams edge. But overall, it's like the Colts are just way better. And I think that they, in terms of an official prediction, I think the Colts exercise their demons in Jacksonville. I think they'll get it done. I don't want to even say they'll get over the hump, because it's like they're beating the Jags of all damn teams. But in a sense, like they'll get over the hump and beat the Jags. I do think Trevor Lawrence will flash why he was picked number 1. I think he'll have some good throws. I think that the Jags will be confident playing the Colts. But ultimately, the talent disparity will overcome the Jags. I think that's how this thing goes. It might be closer than it has any right to be, but man, I just don't see a way that the Colts can keep letting this go. If they do, the Colts really need to reevaluate some stuff. And Taylor actually disagrees. He's picking the Jags. He says, upset alert. Clown Town is a historically tough place to win for the Colts in recent years, yes. He says Colts look very beatable in week 1, and Jags with Peterson could make something happen, potentially. He says Jonathan Taylor needs more touches, always, and wouldn't be surprised if the Colts do win, but he's rooting for the Jags. So it's a little, I think he wants to laugh at the Colts. But, yeah, I mean, I like... If Jacksonville wins, that's fine. I want to see Trevor Lawrence in particular do well. But I don't know. I have a hard time. I think the Colts are coming into this one really pissed off. I think that they really, really don't like all the crap they took this offseason. And, hey, they deserved it. Yeah, I think the Colts are coming into this thing pissed off, and I think that it might be closer than it should be, but ultimately they'll be able to take out the Jags. All right. Next up, Miami Dolphins going to Baltimore to take on the Ravens. Miami and Baltimore are both coming off of wins in week one that were really never in question. However, there was a distinct difference in how the two teams actually did perform. Baltimore performed strongly everywhere. That was expected. They played the Jets, but still, we saw a lot of teams that were contenders not check those boxes, and Baltimore did. Whereas Miami, they had some explosive moments, but they didn't dominate as thoroughly on offense. Some of that's a new offense. Some of that could be the fact that you're still figuring out if Tua is the guy. It's a run-based offense down there. So some of that could be coming into play, and offense sometimes takes a little bit longer to click. But Baltimore's didn't take that long at all. But this game will be interesting, at least from my perspective, because this game really will provide some insight onto how these teams can match up with like the big teams in their division or their biggest threats in their division. For example, the Dolphins receiving core is one of the only ones that you could say is as dangerous as Cincinnati's, just in terms of like the skill at wide receiver. Now, I think that Tua is not Joe Burrow, so we might not see the yards either way. But this is the type of week where I would love to look at like PFF when the week is over and just see the coverage grades and see how well the Ravens held up covering all these guys from Hill to Waddle to Gesicki, guys like that. I would love to see how they held up just to get a gauge of it. And then for the Dolphins, this is an interesting one. This is where they're going up against a defense that can play essentially to the same level as Buffalo, where they have a great secondary and a great D-line. So Miami, I don't think Miami's as big as a threat to Buffalo as Baltimore and the Bengals are to each other. But this is it's a good gauge in terms of projecting next year, year after. Is this team on track to challenge Buffalo? But in terms of the roster, head coach, give me the Ravens. Mike McDaniel turned out to be great, but Harbaugh is established as great. QB, Lamar over Tua, obviously. Running back, Ravens, they got depth there. Wide receiver, Dolphins, clearly. Tight end, Ravens. Mark Andrews. Gesicki's really good, but Mark Andrews is Mark Andrews. I think he's probably the third best tight end in the league, but he's got a claim to be higher than that. O-line and D-line, give me Baltimore. Miami sort of rebuilding in those spots. Linebacker, Ravens as well. They're just more talented there. And then cornerback, I'm giving the Ravens and the Dolphins. Like they're like a high-end tie here in terms of Marlon Humphrey, Marcus Peters, Xavier Howard, Byron Jones. They both have elite corners. And then safety, Ravens. Ravens are stacked at safety. And the special teams, Ravens. You got Justin Tucker. You get that point. Overall, I think Ravens, they could get burnt once or twice, maybe, by Jalen Waddle or Tyreek Hill. Maybe one of them manages to break out. But those are really the only things that I think Miami can do to upset the Baltimore Ravens this week. Lamar and the Ravens will overpower the Dolphins defense, and then timely passing will seal the deal. Yeah, it feels like Miami's ascending, but Baltimore's already there. You know, Miami would have to show some stuff that they've never shown before to take out Baltimore. And Taylor agrees. He says, Ravens have the better QB, and trust me, he does not like to say that. Dolphins could be a sneaky team, but when it comes down to two great rosters, QB is the difference maker. Tua proves he's inept against a real contender. He could prove that. I don't know, man. I'm not as down on Tua because I think, like a lot of young guys, he was drafted into a worse situation than a couple people. I don't think he's great, though. Yeah. I mean, for me, this more comes down to the fact that I think the Ravens defense will take this thing over. The Dolphins defense will hang tough, but ultimately the Ravens will just manage to take it from them. They'll pull away. Okay, moving on. An old rivalry here. We got Tampa Bay going to New Orleans. Tom Brady and the Buccaneers, they have notoriously struggled against the Saints, specifically the Saints defense. Both teams got a win in week one, and they both showed a level of weakness. This is a game that is very important to the NFC South, as these are really the only two teams that people view as legitimate within that division. Tampa looks sharp outside of the red zone offense. That could just be a week one thing and a product of Tom missing a little bit of time. And with some new weapons and everything like that, I think that gets corrected pretty quickly. And then the Saints defense, and really the Saints in general, the Saints started off lifeless, but ultimately rallied to beat Atlanta. Listen, I think everyone rallies to beat Atlanta. When Atlanta gets a lead, you've got them right where you want them. But ultimately here, if we're going to break down the rosters, it's like head coach, give me Bowles over Dennis Allen, so Buccaneers, quarterback, Buccaneers, running back, Saints, wide receivers, Saints, tight end, wide receiver, Bucks, tight end, Bucks, O-line, Bucks, D-line, I got Saints for the D-line. Cam Jordan's great. I love Vita Vea and Akeem Hicks, but neither one of those guys are like... They'll be able to stop the run game really effectively, but I'm a little concerned about their ability to rush. Linebacker, Buccaneers. Cornerback, Saints. Safety, Saints. Special teams, Saints. I think ultimately here, for like my ultimate prediction, I think this time Tampa breaks through against the Saints. They've been able to gather a lot of data, and I just think that they'll put it together this time. It might be a slow start as they really gauge it, but Tampa pulls away in the second half, I think. I think Jameis throws up one or two, and I think they pick off at least one. I don't know. The Saints, they just seem like they're too much of a roller coaster, and I think Tampa just needed a little bit of fine-tuning. So I think that's what happens. I think we get a fine-tuned Tampa that takes advantage of the Saints' inconsistencies and manages to put them down. Taylor's also got the Saints. Or no, he's also got the Bucks. Bucks are more complete roster. Saints have explosive potential. Godwin injury could be a non-factor based on Tampa's wide receiver depth. Record of disrupting the Bucks' plans, but early in the season, he trusts Tom more. Yes, we're essentially in agreement. Tampa just has more depth. Tom's more consistent. And I think that somebody like Todd Bowles can do this. This is also a game where I think the absence of Sean Payton becomes important because it wasn't always just the Saints defense. It was the Saints offense managing to find ways against Tampa's defense. And I think that's a lot tougher without Sean Payton. So I think that the gap has narrowed. It's never that the Saints were better. It's just that for some reason, the Saints were just kryptonite for Tampa Bay. So, yeah, we agree on that one. I don't like how much we're agreeing, but it is what it is. Early in the season, it sort of just picked the team that was your favorite going in. Next up, we got the Washington Commanders going to Detroit. I got the Lions taking this one. A game between two teams that from which not much is expected. For me, the Lions are just more interesting, and it's two teams that feel like they're sort of heading in different directions. It feels like the Commanders are sort of just constantly treading water between bad ownership, messy rosters, losing guys, injuries, all that stuff. It never seems to break Washington's way. Meanwhile, it feels like Detroit has sort of like finally gotten on track, and they're just slowly building. Last year, they got Penei Sewell, started building the trenches. This year, Aiden Hutchinson, and then Jamison Williams. We're not going to see Jamison Williams due to injury, obviously, but they're doing all the right stuff because they got Amon-Ra St. Brown last year. They got T.J. Hawkinson at tight end. They're just doing well and building at important positions. It feels like their approach is that the last position they're going to address is quarterback. But Washington could easily win this game in terms of Washington and Detroit. They're sort of on the same level. I just wouldn't really take much from it if Washington wins. I feel the same about them. But in terms of breaking down these rosters, for head coach, I'll give the nod to Rivera for now. I think him and Dan Campbell might be on a similar level of coaching, but we've just seen Rivera take his teams farther. Quarterback, Wash. I don't want either of them. Running back, Lions, for sure. DeAndre Swift's very good. Receivers, Terry McLaurin alone makes me give it to them. Tight end, I'll take Hawkinson. O-line, Lions. D-line, Commanders. Linebacker, I'll go Lions. Corner, Commanders. Safety, neither one of these teams really have like safeties to speak of. And special teams, it's sort of the same thing of not particularly special, not the worst in the league either. But overall, they're two teams that are similar in skill. And I think the optimism in Detroit stomps out the dysfunction in DC, and it'll be close until yeah, I think it will be. Yeah, I think this game will come down to the very very end. It'll be really really close, and then Detroit will show their mettle, and they'll show how they've grown and how they now understand how to win these close games instead of losing them. He also he's also taking the Lions. He says he's taking the Lions for funsies. For funsies, gosh. He says Amon-Ra St. Brown's a legit one. Could be fun to watch first overall pick for second overall pick from 2016 if they both look in their prime. I don't think that he's a legit one. I think he's very good. As of this year, he's not a legit one. I think if you have him, he's like one of the better. He's like a good number 2 and the best number 3 in the league, unless you're on Tampa. So, yeah. But yeah, we both got the Lions, so fair enough. Detroit, you're not going to have to wait half the year before you finally get a win. Up next. This is a game that... Ooh. Okay. Seattle's going to San Francisco. Very important game in the NFC West, and it's one that I fully expect to be done or won by San Francisco. They lost a sloppy game in a monsoon in Chicago, but showed their potential for a shutdown defense and efficient offense in moments. Penalties were really the difference for them. Seattle was on the receiving end of that type of game from the Denver Broncos. Otherwise, they would be 0-1. The Broncos really did. It just came down to collapse. Penalties and turnovers at bad times was the only reason Seattle's alive. Then this week, I think the 49ers will dispatch the Seahawks. This is also the first time to truly evaluate Trey Lance and the 49ers offense. Seattle has been a thorn in the side of this team for the better part of a decade, but this year that gets put to an end. In terms of the roster breakdowns here, head coach, I'll take Shanahan over Pete Carroll. Quarterback, wash, don't know enough about Trey Lance, and I don't want Geno Smith. Running backs, 49ers. Receivers, I'll give it to the Seahawks, but that's very narrow. Tight end, Niners. O-line, Niners. D-line, Niners. Linebacker, Niners. Corner, Niners. Safety, even with Jamal Adams' injury, I'll give it to them because they got a Pro Bowler in Quandre Diggs. And the special teams, Niners. I think the Niners are just better than them. If we find a way to lose this game, I will be livid. Absolutely livid. This is not a team we should lose to. And this is a division game. So if we lose this, it basically counts double. So, I mean, the 49ers have a little bit of pressure on them this week to get this damn thing done. And I fully expect them to answer the call. If they don't... oh, God. Oh, if they don't, I'm going to be screaming. But overall, in terms of how I think the game will go, I think the 49ers will take control of this thing early and never let it go. Trey Lance will play overall good. He'll have one wow throw and at least one head scratcher. The defensive front of the 49ers will make the biggest difference, and they will keep Geno Smith running for his life. The Broncos couldn't get any pressure on him. We will. And that'll be the difference. I think Seattle's going to get dispatched by us fairly easily. We're going to bully them. All right, and then Taylor, he also says Niners. Thank God. Niners hope to get back on track. He believes they will. Thank you, Taylor. Roster's leagues better than Seattle's. Thank you, Taylor. Geno's a fluke. I agree to that. I agreed with that to a level. I think he's a competent backup, but he's not going to win for long. Adams is a serious injury to an already weak defense and allowed Niners to flex Lance's potential. Exactly right. Particularly considering run game stuff, it's like Adams is a great run defender. Struggles in coverage a little bit, but in terms of run defense and blitzing, he's really, really useful, and they lose that. So we both agree. We both think the 49ers should handle this pretty easily. Now the next game in the NFC West, Falcons-Rams. A game that features two teams that are simply not comparable. Like, yeah, there's not going to be a ton to say about this game. I think the Rams might look a little bit ridiculous against true Super Bowl contenders, but that is not the Atlanta Falcons. The Falcons looked in midseason form in week one, starting off strong and then blowing it. And I don't really know. There's not much to say here unless Cordero Patterson or Kyle Pitts makes a crazy play. The Falcons aren't going to have much going. Not much cooking. Aaron Donald will feast on the Falcons O-line. Jalen Ramsey, he doesn't have to play Stephon Diggs this week. He gets to play against Drake London. Or I think they might throw him on Kyle Pitts. Even that, he does good. He does really, really well with big receivers. So Jalen Ramsey will be able to handle that. And I think the Rams offense gets back on track against the Falcons defense that really has A.J. Terrell and Grady Jarrett and sometimes Deion Jones. So 3 out of the 11 are decent. Yeah, I mean, overall, it's just like Rams will control this game from start to finish. Might not be a blowout, but it will never be in doubt. And Taylor, same deal, back on track. Falcons outplayed actual potential last week due to week 1 shenanigans. Yep. He expects the birds to come back down to earth, and he just says Rams offense beats Falcons defense. Yep, that checks out. Yeah, this is just one of those games where a lot of people call it a get-right game. This is if the Rams don't get right and look right against the Falcons, then we start to hover our hand over the panic button a little bit in LA. That's for sure. Okay. Up next, we got the Cardinals going to the Raiders. These are two teams that everybody expects to be fringe playoff contenders, I think. They're both coming off disappointing losses in week 1. The Raiders losing a division game to the Chargers. The Cardinals were thoroughly dominated by the Chiefs, though, and really showed no indications of even being competent. Goodness, I think that I want to have faith in the Raiders really, really badly, but the Raiders are just odd. But in terms of the rosters, it's sort of like head coach, wash. I don't want Kingsbury, and I don't know enough about this version of McDaniels. Quarterback, okay, Carr and Kyler are sort of on the same level. I'll say Kyler because he's just a little more dynamic. Running back, Raiders. Receivers, Raiders. Tight end, Raiders. O-line, Cardinals. Raiders O-line was a turnstile last week. D-line, Raiders. Chandler Jones and Max Crosby, I think, will feast. Linebacker, Cardinals. Raiders just don't have anybody to speak of there, and the Cardinals at least have potential in guys like Isaiah Simmons and Zaven Collins. Corner, wash. Neither one have good corners. Safety, Budda Baker gives them the edge there. And special teams, I'll give it to Arizona too. Why not? But I think ultimately this comes down to the Raiders are going to win this by virtue of their quick passing game. They're not going to let the Cardinals guys tee off on them. Granted, the Cardinals don't have much in the way of a rush, so maybe we'll see them get to really go off. The Cardinals just don't have the weapons to pull off the upset. And I think Chandler Jones and Max Crosby are going to make Kyler Murray's life very difficult. Now, the Raiders' secondary is not great either. That's the biggest issues with the Raiders. O-line, secondary. But the Cardinals don't have the guys to exploit it. So, I think with that being said, we don't see another 4-pick game. They're not playing a team as talented as the Chargers. So, I think the Raiders get this one done. I think Devontae Adams has another big game. And I'm not sure this game's hugely close either. It could be, maybe. But my gut's telling me the Raiders take this one, and they do it pretty simply. Taylor says Cards are a dysfunctional mess. He likes McDaniels over Cliff. Fair enough. I like him as an offensive mind over Cliff. I just don't know about the head coaching thing. He says Raiders have holes, but Cardinals have more. True. The Cardinals are Swiss cheese, and the Raiders are just they're just a slice of cheese with 2 bites taken out of it, I guess. I don't know. They're just not. These are 2 flawed teams, but the Cardinals are way more flawed. All right. Up next, we've got the Houston Texans coming to the Mile High City to take on the Broncos. Week 1 was crazy for both these teams. Houston ties with Indy, and Denver shot themselves in the foot. I think this week the world sets itself right. Denver is better than Houston in literally every single way, and they're going to be angry about how that game in Seattle went. I think the Broncos they'll take them out. I think they'll take them out pretty easily, like legitimately. In terms of the only advantage that I give to the Texans is head coach. we haven't seen enough of Hackett, and Lovie Smith has been good in the past as a head coach, specifically in Chicago. But other than that, in terms of roster, it's all Denver. Houston's got nothing for the Broncos. Yeah, I think they'll dominate it. I think this could be the biggest blowout of the week. Plain and simple. Same deal. Oh, he says, Broncos walk into another trap. I believe they'll be sloppy again, but win this time. Better roster. Says Texans have one good player. Davis Mills still questionable to be the guy. Is Rex Burkhead RB1? I doubt it. Yeah, I think that one's really simple, though. Denver's going to bounce back. Too many mistakes in week 1, and they were all their fault. Seattle did nothing to force them. I think that it's going to be a rough week at practice in Dove Valley, and the Broncos come out and take it all out on the Texans. Okay. Up next, we got Taylor's beloved Bengals going to Dallas. This is two teams that need to bounce back in a bad way. Unfortunately for Dallas, Dak Prescott was injured in week 1 and won't play. This game is really going to come down to the Cowboys' defense against the Bengals' offense, in my opinion. The Cowboys' offense didn't show much last week, and with Cooper Rush playing quarterback, I'm not sure they'll show much this week. The Bengals' offense is interesting. I just don't quite trust them. I didn't trust them coming into the year. I saw them as a bit of a fluke. They didn't play well in week 1. And a lot of that was like Pittsburgh forced the errors. It was them jumping routes. It wasn't receivers dropping passes or anything like that. It was Steelers defenders launching up and making plays on the Bengals. I think what the biggest thing in this game for the Bengals, we're about to see how well that O-line holds up, because Micah Parsons and DeMarcus Lawrence can both really rush. So I think that's huge. In terms of head coaches, I call it a wash. I don't like Zach Taylor. I don't like Mike McCarthy. Quarterback, Burrow. I'll take Burrow for sure. Running back, I'll give it to Mixon, but Zeke and Pollard together are a comparable duo. Receiver, Bengals. Tight end, Bengals. O-line and D-line, I got Cowboys. Linebacker, Cowboys. Corner, Cowboys. Safety, Bengals. Special teams, Bengals. So I think that if Dallas is going to win, this is a game they'll win in the trenches. They'll ground and pound this thing, and they'll rush the hell out of Cincinnati's offense. It's really Dallas's only shot, if we're being real. They're going to have to sack Joe Burrow a ton of times. But ultimately, because it would take something like that for the Cowboys to win, I think the Bengals take it. And mostly just due to the Cowboys' lack of ability to put up points. If Dak was here, I still don't know if I'd pick Dallas, but I would view this game as really more of a coin flip than feeling pretty certain that Dallas will win this. If Micah Parsons decides to come in and get 6.5 sacks or something, then Dallas will win. But I don't know. I think since he gets this one, Dallas had some bad injury luck and didn't look good before it either. So I got Bengals, and I don't even need to look at this. I already know he's picking the Bengals. Where's that? Yep. Bengals. There we go. Dak injury is devastating. Bengals take it by default. Oh, I'm surprised you even acknowledged that. Higgins might come back, but Boyd is a good number 2, and he will be playing. O-line needs to look better. That's huge, like I said. Expect a big day for the defense for Cincy. I don't even know if we can call it a big day. It's just sort of they just have no way of attacking you now. So I think the Bengals defense will look good, but I wouldn't call this a big day. But, I think he's sort of right since he takes it by default. Yeah, that seems legit. Okay, now on to Sunday Night Football. It is the Bears going to Lambeau Field to take on the Green Bay Packers. The Bears lucked into a Week 1 win while the Packers got dominated in Minnesota. This week will be different for both of them, in my opinion. Aaron Rodgers will remind the Bears he still owns them, even without any semblance of receiving core. And the rest of the Packers are just better than the rest of the Bears. It'll be a tough night in Lambeau for Chicago. Legitimately, outside of the receiving core, which I would say is a wash between them, because the Bears don't have any good receivers either. It's just Packers, 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 Packers. Except linebacker, you could argue, like, give a shout out to Roquan Smith, but the Packers linebacker core is just way better. Yeah, I think the Packers win this game through every means but wide receiver. So it could be close-ish because they probably won't have a ton of super explosive plays. But this will be a win that I think the Packers control from start to finish. The Bears will have nothing for them. I think this is, speaking of another team that's just going to be pissed off, the Packers are not happy to be embarrassed in Minnesota. I think this is the week that we see that Packers defense that everyone talked about. Everyone's like, oh, the Bears had a good week on offense. The Bears got some really lucky plays on offense. And I think this week the Packers just decide to shut them down. Taylor agrees again. God damn, we're just agreeing on damn near everything. Another get-right game. Yep, Packers right the ship against a terrible Bears team and destroys the Bears' confidence. Yep, pretty much. Packers will get production from Jones and Dillon, and he says Justin Fields is a bum. I don't know if he's a bum, but he's not enough to overcome the Chicago Bears roster. So, yeah, Packers bounce back in prime time for sure. And then from Sunday night, we've got a doubleheader on Monday night for some reason. The first one is the Tennessee Titans going to the Buffalo Bills. Buffalo looked like the best team in week 1, and I expect much of the same in week 2. They hold the majority of the advantages on the field, but we'll see how well they've fixed their run defense against this Titans offense. Bills shut down the Rams run game, but the Rams struggle to run on everyone, and the Titans don't struggle to play that physical brand of football. So Buffalo can prove a lot with this, and I think they will. They invested a lot into that weakness because it was the thing that cost them against New England in the regular season, not in the postseason. But it cost them against New England. It cost them against Tennessee. It cost them against Jacksonville of all teams. Like, when teams got physical with the Bills last year, it didn't go great. And the Titans, they'll play that way. So we're going to learn a lot about the Bills, but I think they're up to the task. In terms of head coaches, they both will get a point for this in my book. Vrabel and McDermott are both really, really great coaches. QB, Bills. Running back, Titans. Receivers and tight ends, Bills. O-line, I'll say the Titans are a bit better up there because they're just designed to go through their O-line a bit more. D-line, I'm giving it to the Bills. Linebacker, Bills. Corners, Bills. Safety, both the Bills and the Titans would get a point here because of the two best safety duos in the league. Poyer and Hyde for the Bills are awesome. And then Byard and Amani Hooker are great for the Titans as well. And the special teams, Bills play really well. So, I mean, I think that this really comes down to how much they've improved that physical style of play, how well that run defense holds up against King Henry. And with the Titans' run game neutralized, if they're able to, I think they put them away and they pull away pretty substantially. If they're not able to, honestly, I'll still pick them to win, but it will sort of start to reveal, like, okay, that could be the hole for Buffalo again. But Titans, they're scrappy, they're tough. I don't expect them to get blown out. And yeah, I expect that they're going to say, we're going to play bully ball against Buffalo and see if we can do it. We'll find out. He also picks the Bills. Potential playoff matchup. If Henry's good to go, I don't think it matters. Bills can stop the run. That's what I'm curious about. Bills offense is far ahead of the Titans, even with no run game. They still have a run game to a semblance, like some semblance of a run game. He says Allen makes up for all. Titans need to show up for the game, even if they are to lose. Needs to prove that that offense without AJ isn't toast. Yep, pretty much. The Titans could have a moral victory here. They would never say it, but if they show that they're able to hang around with a team like the Bills, that's big. Then the last game of the week, and this game, I think the Thursday night game and this game are my two favorites. And that is the Vikings are going to Philly to take on the Eagles. Two best games bookend the week. Yep, Minnesota and Philly both look dominant in week 1, and we're going to see exactly how good these two teams are. They both are teams that everyone was sort of eyeing as those teams are about to step up For the Vikings, it's with like new head coach, new offense, new all that, and then Philly just reloaded their roster in an amazing way. I'm excited because in week 1 they both showed that stuff's real. In terms of their rosters, though, they're even. Like, I'm pretty sure that they actually are even. Head coach, I'll call it a wash. I don't know enough about Kevin O'Connell, and I still just haven't seen enough from Nick Sirianni. So so that's a wash. But quarterback, I'll take Cousins over Hurts. Running back, Vikings. Receivers, Vikings. Tight end, give that to the Eagles. O-line and D-line, I give to the Eagles. Linebackers, I'll take the Vikings guys. Corners, Eagles. Safeties, Vikings. Special teams, even. So yeah, they are legitimate. Let me count here. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2. So the Vikings have one more advantage than the Eagles, and you could argue that for a lot of these things. I think these two teams are just evenly matched. My head says that Philly can win this thing in the trenches. My heart wants to see Minnesota step up and be legit. These teams are really evenly matched, and as a result, let me see here. Taylor's picked the Vikings. Part of me wants to pick the Eagles just to counter that. But man, I really want to see Minnesota win. Fuck it. What's it matter? I'll take the Eagles just so we disagree on something and give him a chance to get a little bit closer to me from the picks from last week. In case you guys didn't catch it, he went 7-9 with his picks last week. I went 10-6. So I'll give him a chance to try to close the gap a little bit. I don't think either of us can feel particularly confident in this one. These guys are even, but I think Philly will win this in the trenches then. I think that their pass rush will get off. I think they'll be able to run the ball. And then guys like A.J. Brown will have another big game. I still think Justin Jefferson will get his, even against Darius Slay and James Bradbury and guys like that. But yeah, Philly's got it happens all the time where skilled teams lose to teams that can just beat you up front. And I think that would be Philly's best path here, and I think that they're going to take it. He says he picks the Vikings as his game of the week. Vikings roster is a bit behind the Eagles, but Jay Jetta makes the offense scarier to him. Eagles secondary will be the deciding factor in the game. Prove it game for Kevin O'Connell. Can he scheme up a great game versus an NFC contender, potential playoff matchup? Yep, pretty much. That all checks out. So, yeah, we honestly have a really great week 2 slate, loaded with interesting matchups and important matchups. So, I'm really excited. Thanks for tuning in, you guys. Have a great rest of your day. Have a great weekend of football. And we will be back to review all the games as well and comment and do some commentary live through them as well. So, peace.